What's up, audiophiles? This is Gary from Audiophile Zone, and we are back with Tom Schnabel, eminent musicologist, to talk about some recordings of the jazz master pianist Ahmad Jamal. What's happening, Tom?
Hi, Gary. Hi, Jazzophiles.
Jazz, is that even a word?
No, I just made it up.
Okay, so I know you're a big fan of Ahmad Jamal.
My whole life. I mean, when I was, I guess, like 20, 21 years old, I had a Garrard SL55 turntable with an auto shutoff. So I listened to Naked City Theme of Ahmad Jamal on Argo. I listened to that every night. It's like a lullaby. So he was just so important to me and so completely. I love classical music and jazz. So Ahmad Jamal was, for me, more perfect than Bill Evans. I loved his approach. I loved his touch. I loved the way he ended his songs. Instead of just sort of fading out, he ended them with authority. And his technique, his touch. Miles Davis loved his touch and also loved his use of space. Didn't crowd, not too many notes, everything else. So Miles loved him, and Miles didn't give praise to a lot of other musicians. He just didn't do it. But he did with Ahmad Jamal. So Ahmad Jamal, lifelong love of his. I sort of knew that, he was, born in 1930. So, he was getting on in years. And I knew at some point I was going to find out that he had passed away. And that just happened very, very recently. But, he had a long life. God bless him. I would imagine maybe being a Muslim, not drinking, not smoking, getting up 5 times a day or waking in the middle of the night for prayers. I guess that sort of preserved him and made him outlive many of his jazz musician peers.
So, yeah, like I mentioned to you, I think he was the first one that I remember taking a Muslim name, and that was back in 1950. So that's pretty incredible.
Yeah, I mean, who wants a slave name? Muhammad Ali didn't want Cassius Clay. That was his slave name. And of course, he converted to Islam and paid a heavy price for that. But that's another story. We're talking about Ahmad Jamal.
Right. Didn't you interview him a couple of times?
Tried 5 times.
Oh, you tried, but weren't able to.
No, 5 times. No, I interviewed him. He came to the studio.
Oh, okay.
Signed my records, and probably about five times. I think in the old KCRW studios, in the middle school, way back when, all the way through the 1980s into the 1990s. Yeah, he did. Maybe even into the 2000s. I always tried to get him into the studio when he came to town.
What did you think about him personally? Was he a friendly guy?
He's a beautiful man. He's a beautiful man. Bespoke dresser, friendly, not too formal, not stiff or uptight. And he just seemed to really appreciate the fact that, that I was a public radio guy who loved his music. So he was just a total sweetheart, and very self-effacing. He was not any type of a blowhard or anything like that. He was self-effacing and absolutely wonderful to be with.
Yeah, it's an amazingly long career from the late 40s into 2020. So
I think he did his first record. It was either in like 1949, 1950, or maybe 51. There was the jazz scene of Ahmad Jamal.
Right, I saw that one. Yeah,
I think that was on Epic Records, and that's been reissued on vinyl. I have a copy, audiophile vinyl, I might add. So yeah, he recorded a lot of records. He recorded for Epic. He recorded then to Argo, thanks to Michael Kaskuna, who went through the whole Argo catalog and put it out in a mosaic box, which is probably still available somehow, maybe used. And then there were all the cadet recordings from the 60s and into the 70s, which have not been reissued ever, either on vinyl or on CD. So
Yeah, that's odd. I looked it up, some of the recordings up on some streaming services, and obviously, if they're not were never released on CD, that they're not going to be available. So I wonder if the masters are still floating around somewhere.
well, assuming they didn't go up in the Universal fire, and when was that? 2000, I think it was, the big
It
Universal.
was a while ago. You know,
Yeah,
really no, they've never had an accounting of what went up. They're keeping it kind of secret.
they, not only that, but they didn't put it out to the public for a million years because they didn't want to get sued. By people. Steely Dan, I think, sued them. They didn't want to get sued, so they kept it under wraps. It was a big fire, and a lot of stuff burned.
Yeah, what a shame. All right, let's move on to some of his recordings. The first one we have is one of the cadet recordings from '66. What can you tell us about this one?
I love Heat Wave. Heat Wave was a Irving Berlin song, but I also like some of the other songs. There was April in Paris, and Ahmad with a ballad. Oh, he's just so good. I like Jamal Nasser and Frank Gant. That was his second group. The first group was Israel Crosby playing bass and Vernel Fournier. Vernel Fournier.
Was he much of a composer himself?
No, not really. I think he did more of it composing later in his career, like the Blue Moon record, which we're going to hear. He composed a number of the songs there. There was a companion volume to that recorded in the same session called Saturday Morning, and then there was a third album called Ballads, which were just basically he was just playing the grand piano in the studio. And the producer had the tape going. Ahmad didn't even know it. He was just playing the songs and just improvising and playing. And it was so good that they put it out. So that's called ballade, or ballads in French. So those three are like fabulous late works of Ahmad Jamal.
On the cadet recordings, how many he put out? Like 5 recordings on cadet, wasn't that something like that?
At least five. At least five. There was Heat Wave. There was, that's in the discography. There was I Hear a Rhapsody. There was Cry Young, Ahmad Jamal with voices. There was another one with voices. There was Extensions. And I'm trying to think of what else, but there were quite a few. There were probably more than half a dozen.
Okay, this was with the same trio mostly, except with the one with voices.
I think that it may have been Jamal Nasser and Frank Gant, not Vernel Fournier and Israel Crosby. Israel Crosby, his basses died. And I heard once that Ahmad Jamal, he stopped playing and touring for quite some time just due to the devastation that he had with losing his bass player. I mean, it was like a tight-knit family. And losing the bass player just threw a wrench in the gears, and he stopped performing.
Yeah, so very similar to the Bill Evans situation.
How so?
When his bass player died.
Oh, with Scotty LaFaro.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's it. That was the devastating blow to that group too. I guess the bassist is the foundation of the group in some ways.
The bass is where all the music is heading and where everybody is following. If you're a musician, you follow what the bass player is doing in terms of changes and stuff.
Right. All right, let's go on to his next recording, which is a much later recording, 2012, and this is what we talked about a little bit, Blue Moon.
This was recorded in France. It came out on the Jazz Village label, the jazz imprint of Harmonia Mundi Records. And he's with a whole bunch of guys. He's with his bass player. Reginald Veal playing bass, Herlin Riley, great drummer, and Manolo Badrena, percussion. Manolo came from Weather Report, he came from a bunch of other groups. So he had 2 drummers. So I think that his style became a little bit more percussive and a little bit different. Maybe a change in style. a change in style, but certainly nothing lacking at all. Very powerful playing. Um, the playing on Invitation, I recommend that. 13 minutes, it's just fabulous. Blue Moon, just fabulous. There's a beautiful ballad that Ahmad wrote called "I Remember Italy." I think Morning Mist, This Is the Life. So he actually, maybe Gypsy too. So he wrote a bunch of material for this album, and he didn't do that quite so much with his earlier records. I think Cry Young with Voices might have had some originals. But as far as I'm concerned, Ahmad Jamal never made a bad record. And when I go to Amoeba, and I've been going there for a number of years, I look in vinyl and say I'll buy whatever I can, hoping that it's in decent condition, especially the cadet stuff. So over the years, I have just about everything.
Was this released on vinyl too?
That's a good question. I believe so. But I'm not 100% sure.
I used to actually use the CD for demo CD.
It's a great recording.
It's got excellent sound.
It's a really good recording. Yeah, it's a
the
really
combination of percussions and his playing, it's amazing. I agree. It's amazingly powerful playing, especially for his age. You would think that he would not have this kind of power at that age.
Well, yeah, he was blessed with good genes, and again, not drinking, smoking, taking care of himself. He outlived everybody else, and really gave the lie to what people think of as the jazz life. Remember, he opened up a club in Chicago called the Alhambra in I think around 1960, 61, somewhere around there, and there was no alcohol served.
Oh, I didn't know that.
No alcohol served. And of course, it was his club, beautiful. It was styled after the Alhambra, or after the famous building in Spain. But again, with no bar money, with no alcohol, it was doomed to failure, which is kind of really, really too bad. As someone who hates people who talk in a music session, especially in a jazz club, the smoking is a whole other thing. But it was a beautiful attempt, but it was doomed to failure because they didn't have the bar income.
Right, and you couldn't charge the covers they charge these days, so it's very difficult to make a profit.
Yeah.
Okay, so I want to go to your playlist that we have up there on Spotify. Talk a little bit about what's on this.
This is a personal playlist. These are my favorite songs of Ahmad Jamal, and I put a lot of them in. I think I put something like 20 of them, 20 of them, going through most of it, except for the cadet sides, which weren't on Spotify. So we started with Poinciana, which is his most famous song. Keith Jarrett also plays a version of it, which I included in the playlist. And there's then the jazz detective Zev Feldman just put out 2 sessions in Seattle, and they featured Poinciana too. That was his hit song. I'll never forget when Rachel Flowers came to the radio station, and I had just been in a car accident and injured the day before, so I was pretty shaky. And she sat down at the piano and started tapping the piano lid to Poinciana. And I fell apart. I started crying. I was so fragile, but also just the hearing that the da 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 da. It's like you recognize immediately before the piano even starts. This is Ahmad Jamal's Poinciana. One of the beautiful songs, and he recorded at the Pershing in Chicago in 1958. I think that was one of the first songs or albums that sold like 1 million copies, which is amazing for a jazz musician. And besides Kind of Blue and besides Take 5, this is Ahmad Jamal. So had to start with that one because that's the iconic song of Ahmad Jamal, and this is the iconic version from the Pershing Club in Chicago in 1958.
Right, and the playlist was quite wide ranging. Maybe mention another selection that you thought was
I will.
interesting.
I will. Uh, Miles Davis covered New Rumba, the first album with Gil Evans, so I had to include that. Um, I let's go down. I the What's New from the Ballads album, him in the studio, not even knowing that he was being recorded, but he was, and he liked it, and it got put out by Jazz Village Records. So I wanted to include that. I love his version of Herbie Hancock's Dolphin Dance, which came out from one of his maybe two Impulse records, from this one from 1970. We put in Invitation from Blue Moon, as well as an Ahmad Jamal original called I Remember Italy, which is a beautiful ballad. We heard Keith Jarrett perform Poinciana from Paris in 1999. We heard an interesting song by Morton Gould called Pavane, which Coltrane used as a template for impressions. Very interesting.
Oh,
And yeah, people don't know that, but it was Morton Gould, who was kind of like a classical light composer, wrote this beautiful song, and God, jazz musicians flocked to it. Like I said, Ahmad Jamal did. Coltrane based the changes of impressions on that. Let's see what else. Snowfall, which was a Claude Thornhill song. Claude Thornhill was the guy who really sort of trained Gil Evans with this sort of sound, the tubas, the French horns, etc. So this is a Claude Thornhill song from the Alhambra in 1961. And then going down further, April in Paris, beautiful song. I want to mention that the Heat Wave record also has a beautiful ballad, his ballad version of April in Paris. Great song, and it really showcases the ballad artistry of Ahmad Jamal. I don't think anybody can touch him, not even Bill Evans. I'll put myself out, risk some hate mail for that, but I'm going to say it anyway. And that's on YouTube. You can listen to the whole record, all 33 minutes of it on YouTube. So I guess that's about it. 20 different tracks is a good way of, I guess, a starter recipe for the great Ahmad Jamal.
right. I think that people I should have put the track listing on there, but I didn't know how. So I suggest people go right to Spotify and
Just
you
put the
can
link
search
in.
you
Just put
can
the link.
search, you put the link in that's on the screen and you'll be ready to go. And any comments, go ahead and forward to Tom. He'd be glad to hear them. So that's it for our little tribute thing. And it's such a long career. We might have to do this again at some point.
Well, that'd be my pleasure because I am the biggest fan of Ahmad Jamal. It's interesting. I once got, after I had him in the studio, I got an email from a woman who said, "Oh, I heard him in Tangier in 1962." Ahmad went all over the place. He played in a lot of different countries. Some great recordings in Paris you can find on YouTube that he did at the Olympia Club. And I encourage you to please watch the video of Darn That Dream, 1959, Columbia Studios, with the most famous jazz musicians around in the studio. Ben Webster, Count Basie, all these other people. Nat Hentoff was in there. Here you have a 29-year-old Ahmad Jamal playing this ballad, just incredible. It's beautiful to watch the way Vernel Fournier uses the brushes. He had a very unique style of playing. That's why Ahmad used him. And then Israel Crosby, of course, on bass. So it's a fabulous video, and it's one of the few videos. Television didn't do much for jazz. It really didn't. But this is and I think there was also a recording that Miles Davis with Gil Evans in Columbia 30th Street Studios that CBS did too. So
Right. I think you had a link to that YouTube video in your on your Facebook page,
yes,
right?
yes, I did.
Okay,
Yes.
I wanted to mention that for further information, go ahead and go to Tom's Facebook page, and you'll see the links and a lot of additional information.
God bless Ahmad Jamal. He gave us so much beauty and so much great music.
Well, Tom, it's been a pleasure once again. All right,
Thanks for
let's do it
inviting me.
again.
Thanks for
Okay,
inviting me, Gary, and we'll do it again.
we'll talk soon.
Cool.